you have to be selfish if you're a person that's rich, that's making money, and you don't want to pay your fair share of taxes. Well, when you think about the billionaires in the state, in the city of New York, they make up about 48% in terms of the amount of taxes that they dole out compared to the average American, compared to the rest of New Yorkers. And if you're talking about raising their taxes while doing these other things, you're making New York unattractive, not just for residents, but for businesses.
Clip 1. Stephen A. Smith didn't tiptoe into this debate, he kicked the door down. The moment the conversation turned to taxing the wealthy and reshaping New York's economy, he made his stance crystal clear. Calling out what he sees as selfishness at the top, Stephen A. acknowledged the argument for fair taxation, but quickly pivoted to a hard truth. Billionaires already shoulder a massive share of New York's tax burden. Push them too hard, he warns, and the state risks making itself hostile, not just to the rich but to businesses, jobs, and long-term stability.
85% of the population lives there. That's where I live. That's why I'm on POTUS. That's where we live. We ain't veering one way or the other to the extreme because we understand, it is about affordability, but it's also about the economy. It's also about safety in the streets. And when you're talking about the combination of a free bus rides or free grocery stores, and oh, by the way, less police, or at least not more police officers, and not prioritizing law enforcement in the streets of a city, of a state, of the United States of America, you got a problem.
According to Stephen A., this debate isn't theoretical, it's personal. New York isn't just a political experiment to him. It's home. He stresses that most New Yorkers live in the middle, not on ideological extremes. They care about affordability, yes, but also about public safety, economic opportunity, and stability. And when policies promise free services while dialing back law enforcement, Stephen A. says that's when the alarm bells start ringing.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me be very, very clear. If the Democratic Party becomes the likes of Zohran Mamdani, who, by the way, I like, I'm not trying to throw any shade on him or anything like that, but if the Democratic Party becomes him, you have no chance. You have no chance. On a national basis in terms of the presidency. In Senate seats in the House, you have no chance. You have no chance. I want to be very, very clear about that. You might have a Democratic Socialist sprinkled here and there, but that ain't what America is. America's about capitalism. America's about dollars and cents. America's about an economy, a flourishing economy, okay? And you know what it's not about? Free stuff.
That's when Stephen A. unloaded on what he sees as the Democratic Party's growing disconnect from reality. He argues that offering free bus rides, free grocery stores, and reduced policing sounds compassionate on paper, but collapses under real-world pressure. In his view, these ideas ignore how cities actually function and risk creating chaos instead of relief, especially in a place as complex and crowded as New York.
I like Mamdani. I'm looking forward to interviewing him. He's promised to be on this show. But I'm very, very concerned about some of the things that he said. I'm very concerned about what he once said about defunding the police. I'm calling 911. I'm being real with you. I'm calling 911. That's what I'm doing. I don't want to see less police officers. I want to see more police officers. I heard him talk about mental health experts in the subway system. I don't care about that. I want cops in the subways in New York City, where I was born and raised. Born in the Bronx, raised in Queens. That's what I want. I want to hear about no damn mental health experts in subways. Nah, I'm not trying to hear that.
Then came the blunt warning. Stephen A. made it clear, if the Democratic Party fully embraces figures like Zohran Mamdani as its national future, their presidential hopes are dead on arrival. He isn't attacking Mamdani personally, in fact he says he likes him. But nationally? Stephen A. believes America isn't built on democratic socialism. It's built on capitalism, economic growth, and earning, not government-guaranteed handouts.
2% tax on the rich. Okay, fine. 11.5% capital gains tax on its face. Okay, fine. Free buses, free grocery stores in each borough. Really? Really think that's gonna work? Ladies and gentlemen, we're at a crossroads in this nation, and there's no way. And the level of vitriol that you see amongst the American citizen is because, God forbid, that you have a difference of opinion. It's not enough to agree. You know, people have to be disagreeable.
Stephen A. argues that Democrats keep making the same mistake, misreading the electorate. While party insiders applaud bold promises and big government solutions, everyday voters hear higher taxes, weaker policing and fewer incentives to work and invest. Voters aren't asking for free stuff, he says. They're asking for opportunity, safety, and leadership grounded in economic reality.
And if you're talking about raising their taxes while doing these other things, you're making New York unattractive, not just for residents, but for businesses. And if you make it unattractive for businesses and you compromise the ability to be the capitalists that these people are, then they take their businesses elsewhere. So the money that they paid on their homes or on rent, they move out of the city or the state. Businesses follow. And ultimately the tax burden falls on to New Yorkers out there.
Public safety is where Stephen A. draws a hard line. Mamdani's past comments about defunding the police and replacing officers with mental health workers in subways triggered one of his sharpest reactions. Stephen A. didn't sugarcoat it. Subways are unpredictable and dangerous, he says, and when people feel unsafe, ideology disappears. Americans want cops, not social experiments, protecting their daily commute.
Which means that rent freezes, which is also something that Mamdani pushed. Is that really going to be plausible? Are you really going to be able to freeze rent? Or are you going to end up hiking it because you don't have enough people here to pay it? Tax revenue, where you getting that from? See, these are all the kind of things that we have to connect the dots and ask ourselves, 1 + 1, does it equal 2? Is it really plausible that these things are going to happen? According to Mayor Hochul, 90% of the stuff Mamdani said he can't do on his own. He got to come through her in the state legislature in order to get it done. Is he going to be able to do that? What level of support is he going to have outside of young whippersnappers out there who love him and are so in love with his personality and everything else that they didn't really dot the I's and cross the T's and look at actual policies and the kind of effect that's going to have on New Yorkers? That's what I'm worried about. I hope I'm wrong.
Next, Stephen A. turned his attention to Mamdani's economic proposals. Higher taxes on the wealthy? Fine, he says, to a point. But free grocery stores, government-run markets, and sweeping subsidies? That's where he calls the plan reckless. In his view, these policies don't punish the rich. They drive them away, shrinking the tax base and leaving working-class New Yorkers stuck paying more for less.
I'm looking forward to sitting down and interviewing with them. I just want to know where the money coming from. See, I count. Okay, I count. And I can't tell you how many young teenagers, it could be daughters, it could be nieces and nephews, it could be friends and family members or relatives of folks along that age gap. And you're asking the same question. And you know what you come up with? The people who love Mamdani the most are not people who pay bills every day. I'm not saying that applies to everybody. I'm not applying that. But they certainly not people that pay bills every day all the time. You don't see business owners clamoring to support them. I'm just saying these things are important to bring up because there's going to be a divide that takes place. Remember, Mamdani's ascension and his win in the mayoral election in New York last night is entirely different.
Stephen A. warned that New York is already seeing the consequences. Businesses and high-income residents are leaving for lower tax states, taking jobs and revenue with them. When that happens, the burden doesn't disappear. It lands on the middle class. According to him, this is how great cities decay slowly, not overnight, but through bad policy and ideological stubbornness.
But the reason I bring that up is because their campaign was a bit different than Zohran Mamdani. They were talking about affordability issues just like he was. But they were also a bit more pragmatic in their thinking. They weren't talking about free grocery stores and free bus rides. They weren't talking about those things. They were talking about centrist kind of policies that would ingratiate themselves with the vast majority of American citizens in their respective states. Because guess what? They recognize that's where the meat of the electorate lives.
Then Stephen A. raised the question most supporters avoid. Where is the money coming from? Rent freezes, massive programs, expanded services. None of it works without revenue. He points out that many of Mamdani's most enthusiastic supporters aren't the ones paying business taxes, property taxes, or payroll. Passion is loud, but bills are louder.
And when you're talking about the combination of a free bus rides or free grocery stores, and oh, by the way, less police, or at least not more police officers, and not prioritizing law enforcement in the streets of a city, of a state, of the United States of America, you got a problem. You got a problem. And so now we got to sit up here and we got to ask ourselves, where are we going from here? Where you going to find yourself? What you going to do? Because we got a shutdown going on.
Stephen A. also highlighted a political reality check. Mamdani can't act alone. Nearly everything on his agenda must pass Governor Kathy Hochul and the state legislature. That puts him in a trap. If his plans stall, he looks ineffective. If they pass, Stephen A. believes the economic shock could be severe. Either way, the momentum risks collapsing.
How long you think that's gonna last before disorder reigns? You can't do this to American people. You can't do it. Now I know that we've seen politicians say all of these things and address some of these things, but I ain't satisfied the fervor with which it's been addressed because the shutdown is still going on. And needless to say, the president chimed in because a lot of people chimed in.
In the end, Stephen A. delivered a brutal conclusion. Elevating Mamdani nationally could fracture the Democratic Party, splitting business owners and working professionals from voters chasing government guarantees. Elections are won in the middle, not on ideological extremes. Without a serious course correction, Stephen A. says Mamdani's national ambitions and the party's strategy are headed straight for a political wall.